The desert was endless, an ocean of glass and gold, where even shadows dared not linger. At its center rose a fortress unlike any other, carved not of stone but of cool flame, the obsidian citadel, home to Azrael, the king of flames. The citadel breathed heat. Its towers shimmered with molten light, and rivers of fire wound through its black halls like veins of a living beast. The sky above never darkened. A burning sun hung motionless, trapped in eternal noon, its light caught in the king's curse. Azrael stood upon his throne of cinders, a crown of molten gold hovering above his brow. His skin was pale as ash, his eyes ember red, 2 suns trapped within a man's face. With a gesture, he could summon storms of flame or silence entire armies. Yet in his gaze lingered something colder than death, emptiness. For centuries, Azrael had ruled alone. His servants were fire spirits, beings of pure heat, bound by ancient oath to obey him. None could touch him, none could love him. For the king of flames was a god of his own making, and gods are prisoners of their immortality. He once had a heart, long ago, but to gain eternal dominion over fire, he had to surrender what was most human, his shadow, the vessel of his soul. It lived apart from him, bound in chains beneath his throne, whispering at night like a dying flame. It was said that as long as a king's shadow remained captive, his fire would never fade. But every eternity cracks. And this one began to crack the night of the eclipse. It was the first eclipse in 1,000 years. The eternal sun dimmed, its light bleeding into black smoke. For the first time, the citadel knew darkness, a thing forbidden in the kingdom of flame. The fires trembled, the spirits hissed in confusion, and the king rose from his throne. "Something stirs beyond the veil," he murmured. "A mortal dares breathe within my storm." Far below, in the glowing corridors of obsidian, a human moved. Her name was Leora, a thief, a wanderer, and the last survivor of a village the flames had devoured years ago. Her cloak was scorched at the edges, her boots melted at the soles, but her eyes, sharp, defiant, gleamed with purpose. She had crossed the desert with one goal, to steal the king's shadow. Legend whispered that whoever possessed it would hold the power of life and death. But for Leora, this was no quest for glory. She sought vengeance of the world that the Fire King had turned to ash. The citadel was alive. Its walls pulsed with heat, its corridors breathed. Every step she took made the flames stir, as if the place itself sensed her trespass. Yet she kept moving, clutching the crystal flask she had forged from moonstone and prayer, the only thing that could contain a god soul. The closer she drew to the throne room, the heavier the air became. Her lungs burned. Sweat ran down her back like molten glass. The torches bowed toward her, their fire flickering strangely, almost as if greeting her. She didn't notice. When she reached the final chamber, the sight stopped her breath. Before her lay the throne of cinders, vast, terrible, and beautiful. Above it hung chains of fire that dripped molten embers, and there, bound within them, writhed a figure, a man made of living shadow. His form shimmered between flame and darkness, his eyes hollow wells of sorrow. Her heart pounded. The shadow. She stepped closer, whispering, "I've come to set you free." But before she could reach him, the chamber filled with blinding light. The air turned to fire. From a flame stepped Azrael himself, his arrival, so sudden that the world seemed to bend around his presence. His voice was deep, layered with echoes of thunder and burning earth. "A mortal dares enter my inferno?" Leora flinched, but she did not bow. "I came for what you chained beneath your throne," she said. "The shadow you fear." Azrael descended the steps, each footfall leaving molten prints that sizzled behind him. He studied her, a frail creature of flesh and blood, yet standing before a god without trembling. There was something strange about her presence. The firelight bent around her, not consuming her but wrapping her like a shroud. "Do you know what you steal, human?" he asked quietly. "A curse," she said, "and I'll use it to end yours." A flicker of amusement, or perhaps pain, crossed his face. "And me? You do not understand what I am." He raised his hand, and flame coiled from his palm like a serpent. But before he could strike, the bound shadow let out a sound, a low, mournful sigh that shook the citadel. Azrael froze. The shadow was stirring, reaching toward her. In that heartbeat of hesitation, Leora moved. She hurled the crystal flask into the chains of fire. It shattered in light. The shadow surged, a storm of black flame and memory, and dove straight into her chest. Azrael cried out. The fires of the world dimmed. The sun above the desert flickered like a dying lantern. The citadel groaned, its obsidian towers cracking from within. Leora collapsed to her knees, gasping, her eyes burning with strange light. The king's power faltered. He felt part of himself tearing away, as though his very essence were being rewritten. He fell from the throne, landing hard against the scorched marble. For the first time in ages, the King of Flames bled, a line of molten gold trailing from his hand. Leora staggered to her feet, the shadow within her pulsed, alive, whispering in a language older than fire itself. She turned toward the great doors, her voice shaking but steady. You've burned long enough, Azrael. The world deserved the night. Before he could answer, she fled into the dimming desert, carrying with her the impossible, the heart, the soul, the shadow of the Flame King. And as the eclipse swallowed the sun, the King of Flames, the god who had never known weakness, sank to his knees among the ashes of his collapsing throne. For the first time in eternity, he felt the cold touch of night, and deep within that darkness, something long lost stirred, a heartbeat. The desert at night was not silent. Even without the eternal sun, the dunes whispered with the voices of dying heat. Winds carried sparks that glowed like fallen stars, and far away, the obsidian citadel's fires trembled, flickering in confusion, as if unsure whether to burn or die. Leora stumbled through the sand, clutching her chest. The place where Azrael's shadow had entered her burned with an inner fire. Every heartbeat sent waves of molten warmth through her veins, and behind her eyelids flickered visions not her own. Towers of flame, a king alone upon a black throne, and a voice whispering her name in anguish. She fell to her knees. The moon, pale and trembling, cast her shadow across the sand. But her shadow was wrong. It moved on its own. Stop, she gasped, staring at it in horror. Stay still. The shadow lifted its head. Two faint eyes, ember red, glowed back at her. You carry me, it whispered, though its lips never moved. You should not have come here. Human. Leora's breath caught. The voice was in the air. It was in her mind, burning through her thoughts like wildfire. Who are you? She whispered. I am what you stole. Then I was right, she said, her voice breaking. You're his soul, his humanity. The shadow corrected softly. And now yours. She staggered back, clutching her head. The desert spun. For a moment she felt as if she stood in two places, her feet in sand, and her spirit in the throne room of flame. Through the shadow's memory, she saw Azrael fall, his fire dimming, his hand reaching for her in silence. When she blinked, the vision faded. Only the desert remained. She pressed her hand to her chest and rose, trembling. I'll end him, she whispered. Whatever you are, I'll use you to destroy him for what he did to my people. The shadow's voice was weary. You think death will save you, but you took more than his power. You took his burden. When the fire within you burns too long, you'll see what he saw, feel what he felt. I don't care, she said. Let it burn. By dawn, her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her steps dragged through the dunes. But she didn't realize she was no longer alone. From behind her came the low hum of heat, the faint shimmer of air distorting. She turned, and there he was, Azrael, stripped of his crown, his fire dimmed to a dying glow. His long hair, once burning gold, hung like strands of ember silk, and his cloak was ash gray. His eyes, still molten but softer, locked onto her. You've taken what binds me to this world, he said, voice low but steady. Return it before you burn us both. Leora's first instinct was to run, but his presence stopped her, not through fear but something heavier. The desert itself seemed to bow to him. If I give it back, she said, you'll destroy everything again. You think I wanted to? His tone darkened. You think fire chooses where it spreads? His words made her hesitate. Only for a moment. You burned my home, my family. He looked at her, pain flickering across his face like lightning across smoke. Yes, he said softly, and I remember every scream. Leora's throat tightened. She hadn't expected remorse. Not from a god. She wanted to hate him, but the way he spoke, the weight of it felt almost human. I don't need your guilt, she spat. No, he said, but you'll need my help. The desert will kill you before your revenge ever could. She tried to push past him, but he caught her wrist. His touch was hot, not burning, just alive. The heat pulsed from him into her, and she felt something strange. For a moment, she couldn't tell where fire ended and his began. She jerked away. Don't touch me. Azrael only watched her quietly, his expression unreadable. You won't last a night, he said. The shadow you carry feeds on your life. Soon it will burn you from the inside. Then so be it, she hissed, if that's the price to end you. He studied her for a long moment, then said softly, You misunderstand, Leora. If you die, so do I. They moved together across the desert as the day grew hotter, unwilling companions bound by flame. Leora ignored him, but Azrael followed, his presence like a ghost at her back. The wind picked up, blowing sand into waves that swallowed the horizon. When the first storm hit, they took shelter beneath a jagged outcrop of glass rock. Inside the shade, Leora collapsed from exhaustion. Her hands trembled. Beneath her skin, the fire stirred, restless, alive. The shadow's voice murmured in her thoughts, softer this time, almost mournful. He is not what you think. You defend him now, she whispered. I am him, and I am you. She closed her eyes, shaking her head. You're nothing but a curse. Then why does your heart not fear me? The voice faded, leaving her in silence. She glanced at Azrael, who sat across the cavern, his hands clasped, staring at the sand. The fire in his eyes dimmed to faint coals. Without his full power, he looked mortal. There was a strange vulnerability in the way he breathed, shallow, uncertain, as though he had forgotten how to be human. Why did you spare me? She asked suddenly. He looked up. When you entered the citadel, I meant to burn you where you stood, but the fire refused. Refused? It knew you. She frowned. That's impossible. He smiled faintly, a ghost of one. Nothing is impossible for flame. It remembers every soul it has touched. Her anger cracked then, just a little. You mean it remembers my village? Azrael's eyes darkened. Yes, every ember that fell, every breath that died. You survived because my fire turned away. It chose to leave you. Leora froze, heart pounding. Why? He didn't answer, only looked at her, his expression unreadable. Sorrow, maybe regret, maybe something else. Outside, lightning rippled across the dunes, white fire against gold. The wind screamed like ghosts. Azrael moved closer to the mouth of the cave, his figure outlined in the storm's glow. This world is built on ashes, he said softly. If I die, the fire dies with me and everything will freeze. The desert, the sky, even your heart. She turned away. Good. Maybe then it'll stop hurting. For a long moment, there was only the sound of wind. Then she felt his presence beside her again, close enough to feel the faint heat radiating off his skin. You think vengeance will quiet the pain, he murmured. It won't. Leora looked at him, eyes shining with unshed tears. You don't get to tell me what pain is, King. No, he said, his voice breaking slightly. But I know what it costs. The storm raged on outside, lightning flashing over dunes like shattered glass. Inside the cave, the air shimmered with something neither fire nor shadow could name. When dawn came, Leora woke to find Azrael sitting at the edge of the sand, his gaze fixed on the rising sun. The light glowed faintly behind him, a dull, uncertain warmth, as though the world itself hesitated to burn again. She watched him in silence, her chest still glowing faintly where the shadow lived. Somewhere deep within, a voice whispered, not his, not hers, but theirs. The flame that destroys can also heal, but only if you let it burn the right things. And for the first time, Leora wasn't sure whether she'd stolen his shadow, or he had found hers. The third dawn came crimson and trembling. The sun rose weakly, its heat no longer fierce but sickly, as if the world itself was growing cold. Every spark that had once danced freely over the dunes now hid beneath the sand. The king's stolen shadow had broken the balance of flame. Leora and Azrael walked together in uneasy silence. The desert around them had begun to change. Glass turned brittle. Dunes hardened into cracked black earth. Every step echoed. The air felt wrong, heavy, starved of warmth. Azrael's power was fading, and the more his flame dimmed, the more she could feel his pain, because it now lived inside her too. Each night, she dreamed his memories. A mortal warrior kneeling before a dying sun. A promise whispered to the gods. Let me bear the fire so no one else must. And then, endless centuries of burning, alone. When she woke, she could still taste the ash on her tongue. They reached the edge of a canyon, deep and jagged like a scar carved by lightning. The ruins of an old village lay below, half buried in dust. Charred wood, melted stone, and bones long turned to sand. Leora froze at the sight. She knew these ruins. Her voice broke. This was my home. Azrael stopped behind her. The wind carried the scent of scorched earth. Faint, almost gone, but still enough to stir the ghost that lived in her chest. She walked among the ruins slowly, her hands brushing over blackened stones that had once been walls, her gaze catching on the remnants of a doorway, the one she used to run through as a child. Why did you do it? She asked, her voice hollow. Why, Burnwell couldn't fight you. Azrael's silence stretched. Then quietly he said, because I thought it would save you. She turned sharply, eyes blazing. Save us? You destroyed everything. He looked away, his jaw tightening. You don't understand. The fire wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to purify. There was plague in this place, spreading faster than even the gods could stop. If I hadn't burned it, it would have consumed the world. Leora stared at him, the wind tugging her hair across her face. And who gave you the right to decide that? No one, he said softly. That's the curse. I chose to carry the flame, but it burned away the part of me that could tell mercy from cruelty. I tore out my shadow, my heart, so the fire would obey me, and in doing so, I damned myself. For the first time, she saw it, not a god of wrath, but a creature carved hollow by regret. His eyes, once blazing, were dim coals now, filled with weariness centuries old. She wanted to hate him, but the fire within her pulsed differently, not with rage, but with understanding, because she could feel his truth. Every memory of the flames, every scream that haunted him, flickered inside her chest. Your shadow, she whispered. It wasn't power you feared losing. It was guilt. Azrael met her gaze, a faint, sorrowful smile ghosting across his lips. You see now why I called it my curse. Fire is never evil, Leora, but it remembers everything it touches. He knelt among the ruins, his fingers tracing a piece of melted glass. Within it, the reflection shimmered, not his face, but hers. And beside her reflection, faint and fading, the ghostly image of the shadow, Azrael's human self, trapped and whispering. He's still inside you, Azrael said quietly. The part of me that once knew how to love. Her heart thudded painfully. Love? You think love can erase what you've done. No, he said, but maybe it can teach me to burn differently. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying the faint scent of smoke. Then a sound split the air, a deep, low rumble. The ground beneath them trembled. Azrael looked up sharply. The firestorm is coming. Across the horizon, black clouds of ash began to gather. Lightning arced between them, red and violent. It wasn't natural stormlight. It was a world breaking apart, the balance between fire and shadow collapsing. Leora's hand went to her chest. The shadow inside her burned violently, struggling. She could feel it wanting to return to its original host, to rejoin Azrael. But the bond was tangled now. If it left her, it would take her life with it. What's happening to me? She gasped. Azrael's eyes widened. The shadow has been too long apart from its flame. If it doesn't return soon, both of us will perish. Then take it, she said through clenched teeth. Take it back. He stepped closer, shaking his head. It's not that simple. You bound it with your will. It won't leave you willingly. Then tear it out, she shouted. You're the king of flames. I'm not. His voice cracked with fury and grief. Not anymore. You hold the fire now. The shadow answers to you. The ground split beneath them, molten light spilling from the cracks. Azrael caught her arm as the earth shook violently. The canyon began to collapse inward, fire and darkness swirling together in a storm that screamed like a living thing. Leora could barely see through the smoke. What do we do? Azrael's eyes burned brighter, desperate. You must make a choice, he said over the roar of the wind. Free the shadow and I will die, but the desert will live. Keep it and everything burns. Her heart raced. The flames licked higher, swallowing the ruins of her home, the last pieces of her past. She met his eyes, and in that moment she saw not a god, but a man broken by his own power, begging not for life, but for forgiveness. You can't love something made of fire, he said hoarsely. Then why does it burn when I look at you? She answered. He froze, the words hitting him harder than flame. The storm raged louder. She stepped closer, pressed her hand to his chest, and through his flesh she could feel his heartbeat, weak but real. Then, with a cry, she lifted her other hand to her chest and touched the glowing mark where the shadow lived. The heat seared through her body. Fire poured from her skin, swirling into a halo of light. The shadow screamed inside her, its voice mingling with her own. Azrael reached for her. Leora, stop! But it was too late. The crystal essence of the shadow burst from her chest in a flood of molten light, wrapping around her body before she could fall. It didn't leave her. It merged with her. The flames roared into the sky, and then everything went silent. When the smoke cleared, Leora stood in the center of the ruin, her body aglow with streaks of gold and crimson. Her eyes shone like molten glass. Her shadow was gone. Azrael sank to his knees, staring in disbelief. What have you done? She looked at him, her voice calm but otherworldly. I didn't free it. I became it. He felt the truth of it. She was no longer entirely human. The shadow had chosen her as its vessel. The fire, his fire, now belonged to her. The wind died. The sun flickered weakly overhead. Between them, the air shimmered with something unspoken, fear, wonder, and the faint ache of something both had long forgotten. Hope. The storm had passed, but the sky still smoldered. The desert lay hushed beneath a pall of drifting ember ash, and the sun, once merciless, hung dim and red, a wound that would not close. In that strange half-light, Leora stood where the village once had been. The sand around her fused into glass. Firelight pulsed beneath her skin like veins of molten gold. She was no longer entirely mortal. She was a flame reborn. Azrael watched her from the edge of the ruin, his power nearly gone. The wind tugged at his cloak, scattering ash through the air like dying snow. Every breath he took was agony, every heartbeat fainter than the last. Yet when he looked at her, he felt something unfamiliar burning in his hollow chest. A fragile awe. You've taken the burden, he said hoarsely. The fire that was mine. Not taken, she answered. It chose me. Her voice was layered, human, and something else beneath, a whisper of the same flame that had once obeyed him. The glow in her eyes flickered with sorrow and calm. She walked toward him, the sand melting under her bare feet, but where she stepped, flowers of glass bloomed, petals catching the faintest colors of dawn. Azrael stared, astonished. Fire that once destroyed was now creating. You've changed it, he breathed. No, she said gently. I just let it feel. They journeyed together to the lake of glass, the heart of the desert where flame met reflection and time stilled. The lake's surface rippled with trapped light, each wave showing fragment of the world as it had been. Green valleys, rivers, the faces of people long gone. It was the last memory of life before the fire came. As they approached, the air thickened with heat and memory. Leora felt the lake calling to her, the same way the citadel's flames once had called to Azrael. Beneath the surface shimmered countless souls. Sparks of those of fire had taken. She fell to her knees. They're still here, she whispered. All of them. Azrael knelt beside her. His reflection wavered on the molten surface. Half a man, half a shadow of smoke. The fire never forgets, he said softly. It only waits for someone brave enough to remember. The lake began to tremble. Light coiled upward, wrapping around Leora like ribbons of sun. She could feel every cry, every heartbeat, every memory of the burned, their sorrow, their forgiveness. Tears spilled from her eyes, falling into the molten water, and where they struck, the flame hissed and turned clear. Azrael reached out, touching her cheek. His hand no longer burned. Her warmth matched his own. "You're crying," he murmured in wonder. "So are you," she said. He hadn't realized it until then. Liquid fire ran down his face, not from pain, but from the unbearable ache of release. For the first time in eternity, the King of Flames wept. The lake flared brighter. The heat built until the air itself screamed. Azrael staggered, his body, already fading, began to crack, light spilling from beneath his skin like sunlight through broken stone. "It's time," he said, voice trembling. "You carry the flame now. Let me rest." "No," she cried, catching him as he fell to one knee. "There has to be another way." He smiled faintly, the same sad, peaceful smile she'd seen in her dreams of him long ago. "Every fire must burn itself out before it can be born again. Don't mourn me, Leora. You are what I can never be." The lake's light rose around them, a spiral of white gold fire. She clutched him tighter, refusing to let go. The glow beneath her skin surged, meeting his fading light. Their flames mingled, two hearts beating the same rhythm, two souls divided for centuries finally whole. "If you go," she whispered, "who will teach me how to bear it?" "You already know," he said. "You stole my shadow to end me, but you gave it back to heal me." His body dissolved slowly, turning to embers that floated upward like stars. The lake's roar softened into a whisper, and the air grew cool. When the last spark of him brushed her lips, she closed her eyes. It felt like a kiss, warm, eternal, and gone too soon. When she opened her eyes, the desert had changed. Rain was falling. Tiny drops hissed as they touched the hot sand, releasing clouds of steam that glowed in the rising light. The sky, once blood-red, turned to gold. From the dunes sprouted shoots of green that shimmered as if woven from flame. Life and fire had become one. Leora stood alone by the lake, her hair a halo of red and gold, her skin marked by faint lines of light that pulsed with every heartbeat. The King of Flames was gone, but his essence lived within her, not as power, but as compassion. A faint voice lingered in the wind, carried on the scent of rain and smoke. "I am not ashes, beloved thief. I am every spark you kindle." She smiled through her tears. Around her, the lake cooled to glass, reflecting the first true dawn the world had seen in 1,000 years. Years later, travelers crossing the reborn desert would speak of a figure who walked among the dunes at twilight. Wherever she passed, the sand blossomed into fire flowers that never burned, and her shadow shone instead of darkened. They called her the flame bearer, or sometimes, in whispered prayer, the Queen of Dawn. They said she was searching still, not for vengeance nor forgiveness, but for balance. For every heart that warmed a home, she left a spark of Azrael's light. For every wildfire, she shed a tear that turned the blaze to rain. And when the sky burned crimson each evening, the people would look west and tell their children, "That is the King of Flames, watching over the woman who stole his shadow, the one who taught fire how to feel." Then the wind would rise, carrying the scent of smoke and flowers. Somewhere beyond the dunes, a single flame would flicker, as if the desert itself were remembering. Because even after gods die, their stories do not end. They burn quietly in the hearts of those who dare to touch them, until, at last, fire learns to weep,